Yeah, welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface into depths unknown. I am joined by a very special guest today, Randall Ledet. He's the host of the new SEC podcast, and the proof's in the pudding. The man is an expert on all things SEC. So I wanted to bring him on today to talk about 5 SEC studs that you guys should be targeting in fantasy football drafts. So, Randall, let's get into it, man. Who is your favorite offensive skill player from the SEC and why?
Yeah, I'd say I have 2 favorites, and there's 2 guys I'm going to mention here that are really popular in the SEC, and great to be on the show. The new SEC podcast is awesome as well, but it's got to be Matthew Golden from University of Texas and Luther Burden from Missouri as well. Luther Burden's game specifically, I get big T. Higgins vibes. I think wherever he ends up landing, he'll probably be that second option as a receiver. And ideally, if he's paired alongside like a Jamar Chase type receiver, that could bode really well for his game. The other one is someone who's been rising up the draft boards very steadily since the college football playoffs, and that's Matthew Golden, University of Texas junior. His speed is really incredible. He ran a 4.29 at the NFL Combine, but it's his big play ability that I really like from him in major moments where I think in the NFL, that's when it really matters. Can you make a big play when it matters? And so Matthew Golden and Luther Burden are my 2 guys.
I love Luther Burden. I'm not high on Matthew Golden, but I think he's gotten a little rich for me after running fast and tight. So let's take a minute on him, right? Because he's one of the more polarizing prospects in the draft. And I think an interesting caveat is you are a University of Houston alum,
Yep.
where Golden spent his first 2 seasons before transferring to Texas, and he was returning kicks for University of Houston. I'm sure you watched him when he was a Cougar. Just talk to me about you've always kind of liked this guy, right? So can you just talk to me about kind of the journey that you've seen him go on and what you like about him?
Yeah, what I really liked about Matthew Golden, one, he played from alma mater, University of Houston. He was a 4-star recruit coming into the school. So he had offers from TCU. He had offers from other major SEC schools. And this was at the time when Houston wasn't in the Big 12. So TCU was a really good offer for him. He chose to stay home in Houston, and he got burned his freshman year. Like, he was playing on the field. He was, lined up next to Tank Dell. And so I feel like he learned a lot from Tank's game. He paired well with Clayton Tune at quarterback, who's a backup quarterback now in the NFL. And what I liked about him is that he's always just adopted to the role that he's been put in. He's like, whether he is the second option, he plays like he's a number 1. And then when he had the opportunity to be the number 1 his sophomore year, he finished being second team All Big 12, led the conference when it came to kick returns, and played really well against Texas. Pretty much gave them the tape to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and grab this guy in the portal this next year. And that's when he made the jump over to Texas. Texas, as a program, they eat in the portal. And so they got some other big-time receivers to replace Xavier Worthy and to replace other guys. They had Isaiah Bond this past year as well. And despite all the talent around him, he finished the season in the SEC being tied for first in touchdowns. And so a lot of people are looking at this like, who is this guy? He's not, Isaiah Bond. He's not Silas Bolden. He's a guy. And it wasn't just the plays against Arizona State or the plays in the SEC championship. He's a guy, and there's a reason why he finished the season first in the conference and became touchdowns.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm going to pull up his player profiler page because, to your point, that 99th or 100th percentile 40-yard dash time is, I think, probably faster than you would have even bet he could have ran, right? That took everybody by surprise when he ran faster than Isaiah Bond. I like the Santana Moss comp. What do you think about that? Do you have a comp for Golden?
Yeah, I like the Santana Moss comp a lot. I see a little bit in this game kind of between a Stephen Diggs and a Tank Dell. Steph Diggs from a route running ability, Tank Dell from an ability to make people miss. Santana Moss obviously has, speaking to his full career, has had more success than Tank Dell, but I think he's in a comparative lane when it comes to Stephon Diggs. But when I think about those players, it's when they get the ball, they possess it effectively, and then they're able to kind of make one or two guys miss, and they're very shifty. And if you watch his tape against Kentucky or against Georgia this past season, that's what really stood out. He's a big time playmaker, and he can make the first guy miss pretty effectively.
And he was a kick returner for Houston as well, right?
Yeah, he's a kick returner for Houston as well. I think he had about 2 or 3 kick returns his sophomore year that were resulted in touchdowns. One against Texas when they played. So so when you think about fantasy value, potentially you get a kick returner, a punt returner, and a slot guy who has wide receiver 1 abilities, but maybe playing that wide receiver 2 or 3 position to start.
Yeah. So you said that he, as a sophomore, was second team All Big 12, which like kind of surprising to me with the production. But I think that's where this conversation really has to get into the meat and potatoes, right? Is defending his lack of production. So I'll switch the screen and kind of pull up a tweet that I posted where I at the bottom there you see he's my wide receiver 6. He's not my wide receiver 1. I think Travis Hunter is, even though he's not even a wide receiver. But then you've got Tet. I've got Luther Burden above him. And a few other guys that we'll get into maybe. But I guess the point here is I get nervous about a guy who his career high last year was 58 receptions and at 68th in the country, right? Nothing to write home about. Well, we were talking before the show. We're like, we're not about to go out there and catch 58 passes. So I would definitely be writing home to mama if I caught 58 passes. But I think Gunnar Helm actually led the team in receptions, right? And you mentioned the touchdowns. When I watched the film, a lot of it was like a unique offense where there were a lot of wide open catches for this guy. And, I am an analytics guy at the end of the day. Like, I have an econ degree. I love looking into the numbers. That's sort of the whole genesis of this show, is getting beyond just the film and getting a little more into the data and allowing those two to get married to make good decisions. And, the data is just, as I put in bold there, it's a bit of a nightmare for him. So talk to me. You kind of touched on this, so you don't have to beat it to death. You mentioned he'll play wherever he does, but I think that's where my last sentence is like, great player in real life, 100%. Will he be a high target earner, high-end fantasy football wide receiver? Can you speak confidently as to like whether he will or won't be, and defend if you think he will be?
I think he'll be a worthy contributor. I expect him to kind of sit in that wide receiver 3 or 4 position when it comes to fantasy football for this first season. I think his ceiling is really high, though. I think he's someone, if you're thinking about a dynasty league, you want to get him early, and maybe not necessarily this season, but next season he really breaks out. I expect him to contribute this season as well. And when you think about his production, one of the things I thought about was, we look at the receiver for Arizona, he was their main guy. Right. You look at Travis Hunter. He also had LeJohntay Webster, who had, I believe, more yards or more touchdowns than him this past season. So I think the Texas offense, you talked about it. You have so many weapons around you. Gunnar Helm, a top 5 tight end in this upcoming draft. Jaydon Blue, a top running back in the draft. You have 2 other good receivers as well that played for this school. And that is where I think his production might not have matched the 800, 900 yards on the season. But to me, it's about when you need a play to be made, he was the guy to make the play. So like if they're running plays specifically for him to be a playmaker, that speaks to his abilities. And then the intangibles in terms of the speed, of course, obviously helps as well. You think about who ran the closest 40-yard dash to him this past year from an SEC school, Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy made major plays in the Super Bowl this past season. And so we're seeing in the league right now, speed kills. Santana Moss types, the Tyreek Hill types. I think it's very hard to miss on a guy with speed. And he's sitting at about 6'1". So he looks small, but he's actually pretty tall. in terms of what he brings to the table size-wise. So when I think about defending his production, I look at all the weapons around him at Texas. I look at the offensive scheme, and I look at some of the other comparative guys, of the Litnikoff winner and Travis Hunter, who was not necessarily the number one contributor on his own team as a receiver compared to LaJohntay Webster and some of the other guys.
So one thing you didn't mention is Quinn Ewers. I know a lot of people will make that case for Golden. Like, you try catching a pass from Quinn Ewers, right? Like, do you think what did you think of Ewers' play overall? Do you think he can be a good NFL quarterback? And do you think that is a reasonable cop-out for the lack of production from Golden?
I mean, it certainly could have played a role, right? Ewers, we can go off of the tape the past couple seasons. I think he gets a lot of flack in terms of what he's brought to Texas, even though I would say he brought Texas back as a program. Prior to him being there, they really weren't, winning the Big 12 or the SEC. They weren't making the playoffs. Where Ewers kind of left you wanting more was kind of getting those deep passes down the field, kind of putting the ball on a dot. I think he's a serviceable backup quarterback in the league that has starter potential. But I still think there's more development to be had from him, given all the weapons he had around him. So in the same defense that I give Matthew Golden, when I look at Ewers, it's like you had so many offensive weapons and you were productive. I think the expectation was just higher than what he delivered on, especially when you got a guy like Arch Manning behind him and the upside he brought. So do I think Ewers is an NFL quarterback? Absolutely. Do I think he's an NFL starter day one? No, but I think he has the intangibles to potentially become an NFL starter.
Interesting. Well, we will talk a little bit more about Ewers. So I didn't mean to get ahead of myself there.
No worries.
It just was and it sounds like you're not as like dogging him as much as some people do. And honestly, I'm not either. Like, I think, nobody's perfectly accurate as a quarterback. A lot of it is, what's in between your head. And he seemed to handle having Arch Manning sitting on the bench like about as well as he could, a generational prospect like that. So
I also respect him. I respect him as well because, he declared for the NFL draft and he could have easily went back to college and potentially hopped in the portal and received a $5 million, $6 million NIL deal. To believe in yourself and say, hey, I'm going to go to the pros, I feel ready, speaks to his confidence, given all the injuries and what was at stake for him to stay in college as well. Yeah, I don't think he was probably going to go back to Texas. I think they're ready to play Arch, but I do believe he could have stayed and went to another school and, cashed in and kind of done the whole college transfer thing. So.
Yeah, there's money to be made in college for sure. And being the guy on campus right now. One last thing I will say before we close the loop on Matthew Golden, and I'll make the case for him because this is impressive. I still have him as my wide receiver 6, even though like with this information being taken into account, but this for the people who are full fading him is worth at least considering. This is something I found from at @FBallInsights _insights, Football Insights, really good post. Matthew Golden through week 14, 1.66 yards per route run, 16% targets percentage per route run, 48 yards per game. Bad, right? Last 4 games of the year, Clemson, Georgia, Arizona State, Ohio State, when it mattered, 3.37 yards per route run, 24% target per route run, 102.8 yards per game. So speaks to what you said about elevating his game, being the guy when they needed him. I mean, that speaks volumes. That if he could have had any sort of production like that consistently across the entire season and even his freshman and sophomore year, I think that everything would be debunked around his production, and he proved he could do it against some of the tougher teams. So
yeah, and all those stats like kind of coming from my college football lens. Like when we look at the Houston years, his first year he was playing next to Tank Dell. Tank Dell, I think, was top 3 in the country with 80 yards. Yeah, and Clayton Tune was a NFL quarterback. The next year he played with Donovan Smith. Donovan Smith was not as good. That's why his yards went down from a receiving perspective, but he still was effective and made plays, but the team wasn't good. He transfers to Texas. Now he's sharing that load with other good receivers, and a very impressive tight end in Gunnar Helm. And so I mean, the fact that he turned up at the end of the season says a lot, and against good competition. Clemson's obviously really solid. Georgia was really solid. They lost them twice, but still a good team. And Ohio State was good. He didn't play as well in the Ohio State game, but the Georgia game he played really well. The Clemson game he played really, really well. And Arizona State was his coming out party, of course.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that fantasy managers can also take away from this is like Gunnar Helm, bit slept on right now. Like I'm getting him at the very end of rookie drafts. He legitimately sprained his ankle on his first attempt at running the 40 at the combine, continued to do the drills and stuff. Like that has dog written all over it. To your point, you mentioned him multiple times as a guy that others had to fight for targets from, and I think that Gunnar Helm is being slept on at this point. His ADP's dipped a bit after the combine. I think that's absurd because, again, like you just can't take his athletic measurements into account because of the circumstances. Like he legitimately sprained his ankle badly and then still ran right. Like that's a dog.
He's a dog. He's an absolute dog. And I think, the value of the tight end in fantasy football, I think, is getting vast in the sense there's so many quality tight ends. Like, of course, there's the Kittles. Kelsey had a down year, but I look at a guy like Gunnar Helm. He could have a Dalton Kincaid type level of season potentially. Even a guy like Mason Taylor from LSU, obviously a part of the Jason Taylor family. That's his dad. It's obviously a good sign. Another good SEC guy when we think about tight ends as well.
Yeah, I think I have Mason Taylor slightly over. I have him as my tight end 3 over Gunnar Helm. Kind of sad he didn't make the show sheet. Looking back at like him being an SEC guy, he's a solid player, man.
He's
very solid. And he looked really good at the combine as well. He was like kind of the poster boy of how to run the gauntlet drill, how to just do all the receiving drills. He didn't run at the combine, but he ran at his pro day, ran a sub 4.7, which is what you want to see. So yeah, some quality tight ends coming out of the SEC in this draft. Let us shift gears to the next guy who, again, I mentioned is my wide receiver 3, potentially wide receiver 2 if Travis Hunter is not going to play wide receiver, and that is Luther Burden. And my question for you is like, you're an SEC junkie, right? This guy was highly touted coming out of high school. When I lived, he's from St. Louis. So when I lived in St. Louis, I went to a sub shop and saw some like red hot riplets with Luther Burden on the cover. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? He was like a freshman at the time. I was like, he's clearly somebody. I got to know who this guy is. How long have you been kind of following Luther Burden?
Yeah, I honestly, I can truthfully say I've been following him since the 2023 season. So this past year was the 2024 season. His 2023 season, as most people who follow the draft process can speak to, was unreal. More impressive than his last year. But his performances against Memphis, his performances against Kansas State, it's just his ability to get to the end zone when he's within the red zone is so impressive. That is what always stood out to me about Luther Burden. And you could see his passion when he plays. He loves playing football. He loves being close to Missouri. I've been following him over the past 2 seasons, and I'm really impressed with what he has to bring to the table.
Dude, he is I can't speak highly enough about that guy. I think he is a real wide receiver. Like people were like, oh, a lot of targets behind the line of scrimmage, all this junk about his junior year production. But it's like, this guy did it in high school. He did it as a sophomore. He flashed it as a junior, to your point, game-winning catches down the field when it mattered most, one-handed. Yeah. And then like 34% missed tackles forced percentage is just like unreal. It's like he has so much make you miss. And he's the type of guy who's just like, if you're putting together a street team, or just like a pickup squad, like you want to get that guy the ball. I'm going to pull up his player profiler page real quick.
Let's do it.
I thought the Sammy Watkins comp was kind of interesting, just because it's like I loved Sammy too. I lived in Fort Myers, and he went, so that's where he's from. His godfather was like the security guard at my high school.
No way.
And I remember him saying like, "Oh, I don't care where Sammy goes as long as it's not somewhere cold like Buffalo." And that's ended up
and of course he goes to Buffalo.
Yeah, spoken into existence. But Sammy Watkins is not a bad comp in my opinion, like from a style perspective, and also like just what Sammy Watkins could have been if his career wouldn't have been derailed by injury. Right. So
one thing that does concern me about Burden when I think about his tape this past season was in some of the big games, he wasn't necessarily effective. And I think part of that was he was getting double teamed a good amount. But when he played A&M, he didn't have a ton of production. When he played Alabama, he didn't have a ton of production. And so I could see the concerns there. But when it came down to making a big play, he was always there. In the Arkansas game as well this past season. The character issues, I just think it's just draft talk. I think he's a passionate guy. I'm sure receivers are normally going to be confident. So
dude, I threw some tough questions at him at the combine. I asked like, why are you falling out of the first in mocks? Do people know something we don't? I asked him, why the dip in production his junior year. And I think the answers were about as good as they could have been in terms of like giving him a chance to hang himself a little bit on some of those or say something snarky. And he just like, I don't want to say he deflected them, but he just kind of brushed them off. And I think that was probably the right way to address those questions. I think struggled with quarterback play in his junior year. It was Brady Cook both years, though, right? Like that's the one part I don't understand.
I think Theo Weiss took a lot of the contribution this past year. That was his second year at receiver at Missouri. So he played really effective, kind of like the Chad Johnson, TJ Houshmandzadeh effect, or like an Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, where obviously AB will have more yards, but Juju kind of ate a good amount of that back in the day for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah. I think it was pretty similar to this past year where a lot of the contribution went to Theo Weiss. And I don't think they had the running game to kind of balance the offense. We talked about it when we did our episode last year where Cody Schrader was a beast and he was able to kind of create more of those open passing lanes. You pair that with the Brady Cook kind of drop off in some of his stats. I think the lack of the rushing attack affected the passing attack and therefore affected his production for Luther Burden. And that's not an excuse. It's just more just the offense and how it was humming.
It's a great point. Cody Schrader, man. So it's funny. I say my upside comp for Cam Scatabo is OG Kareem Hunt, like contact balance. But my downside comp is like Cody Schrader because I'm like, you can produce in college. We've seen it, Cody Schrader do it. You know what I mean? But it does not always mean that that's going to get you on the field at the NFL. Last thing I'll share with Matt, with Luther Burden. He was my biggest winner from the first group of wide receivers who participated in the combine. He ran and he did the on-field drills. You can't say that about the other guys. Golden ran, he got a sub 4.3 and was like, I'm done. Tet didn't participate. Hunter didn't participate. Right. So like, I think that was one of the things that really stuck out to me about Luther Burden was he wanted to compete. He wanted to play and he looked really good during those combine drills. Again, we've got the tape that ultimately means a lot more than combine drills, but I like seeing guys who want to go out and compete and want to prove that they're the best of the best. And everything that touched his hands during those drills was a catch. So, cool. Well, okay. Transferring to, so I think after Luther Burden, I think my next wide receiver on my rankings is Tre Harris. And I just see so much like, people. I actually asked Matt Harmon directly about this, who runs Reception Perception. Like, I see some Antonio Brown there, and I'm obviously innately helmet scouting a bit, right?
Yeah. Right.
But the way he could just crush a slant and make a guy miss and take it to the house with that size. I'm all in. I'm all in. And especially relative to like where everybody else kind of has him in their rankings. And, people will talk about over 5 yards per route run. That's literally like record breaking. And you got to take it with a grain of salt because he was injured. He didn't play the full season. People will say some of that production came against like Furman and stuff like that. Yeah. But some of that production came against LSU too, and like I watched the Florida game. He caught one pass before getting hurt on that touchdown catch, but one catch and it was like a 50-yard touchdown where he made somebody miss. And it's just like, he's a player for sure.
Yeah.
So talk to me though, because like I tried to, when we were putting this show sheet together, I kind of greased you up a little bit. I'm like, let's talk about Tre Harris. Let's talk about Tre Harris.
Yeah, let's do it.
Also, like, let's talk about some other guys.
No.
The question is, are you with me on this, bro? Why aren't you all in on Tre Harris with me?
I think it's just a little bit of a recency bias. Like if Tre Harris was eligible to come out last year, he might have been in that more of that wide receiver one discussion. It's tough to kind of put him in that one just because of what the guy at Arizona did this past year, where Travis Hunter is ranking in terms of being DB or wide receiver. And I think when I think about like the wide receiver position, I still think he's a top 5 guy. In the overall draft, if he slips to the second or third round, we'll say second round, it's just because it's a deep draft, like in terms of like the NFL draft. For the fantasy football piece, he's a guy. I mean, he's 6'2". You talked about that Florida play. He obviously played really effectively in that game despite the loss. He's proven to be more effective on those intermediate and deep routes. So while you love his slants, I think that's an area of opportunity for him. And that's going to be a big piece in the NFL as these guys can jam more effectively than they do in college. But he's a baller. He finished the season in 2023 leading the SEC in touchdowns. And it was really, the discussion was, who's the best receiver in the SEC? Is it Luther Burden or is it Tre Harris? There ended up being some additional entrants to that party this past season. But in terms of the hype around Tre, I think it's very much justified. And I think he's going to be a very solid pro. And then you look at the Ole Miss NFL family, you got DK Metcalf, you got who's the guy, AJ Brown. There's a lot of guys that
you got Jonathan Mingo.
You got also Jonathan Mingo. There's a lot of guys that point to him being successful, and I think he'll be a good pro. I really do.
So last question, closing the loop on this wide receiver group in the SEC.
He seems like a Dallas Cowboys type. I could see Jerry Jones, if he was there at the second, third round, kind of taking a stab at him and saying, hey, you know what? Let's pair him next to CD.
Dude, did you see that thing that JB Fox posted where like he's sitting next to Jerry Jones and Jerry Jones is like giving the guy's measurements? He's like 5'10", 220, 8-inch dong or something like that.
I saw that.
JB Fox ended that real quick, bro.
Right. That was some suspect conversation. Maybe he saw what Des Bryant brought to the table a couple of years ago, and that's a part of his scouting package. No pun intended, but that was
package.
Yeah, that was quite a comment from Jerry.
But my point is, to your point, Jerry's just sizing him up like, oh yeah, that would look real nice.
That would look really good. Put that in the silver britches.
So last question on these guys. I kind of skipped over it with Burden, and I want to get back to it. Give me, where do you think they are going to go? Is Burden a first round guy? And where is Tre Harris going to go in the NFL draft? For what round?
I think Burden could find himself in the first round. I think some of this like character issues, concern is could be smoke and mirrors. I think he's a late first, if not teams trading up in the second round to make a play for him. I think Tre goes late second, early third. I think Golden goes first round. I mean, if you look at last year, there's guys like the last year for the draft for receivers, you had Xavier Legette went first round. We had Xavier Worthy went first round off of speed and production. Ricky Pearsall went first round. He didn't really do too much this past season. I think these guys are significantly better than a couple of those guys I just named. I think Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas both had great seasons. Xavier Legette did not, and Xavier Worthy and Ricky Parasol. Xavier Worthy had an okay season. Ricky Parasol did not. So if you think about those 5 guys going first round last year, this year a little bit better draft when it comes to defensive players and O-line and depth, but these skill guys are really good. And I think there's some teams that are not going to want to miss out on them. So I expect most of those guys to go between late first to early third.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, for fantasy football, draft capital is king. Like, you can run from it, but you can't hide. And where Golden will probably go in the first round, I think that's a damn near lock at this point, based on just experts' mocks. And we know NFL teams get enticed by that speed. I still think you have to do these evaluations before the draft, and then not just completely bail on your analysis after. You take it in, you weigh it as the highest weighted factor. But I don't know if I'm, unless Tre Harris is slipping into the third, I don't know if I'm pushing Golden above him. And that's just based on sort of how much higher my initial ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 is for Harris. I have so I'm not addressing that. I have Harris at an 8.6 and I have Golden at an 8. So out of 10. And so it's a pretty, again, and I adjust those based on draft capital, but that's not nothing. Like, I only have a few guys over 8, period.
Right. And I think
so
the draft,
that's not bad either, but it's
not bad. And I think the draft capital score, I'd have to imagine, also will be, flexible depending on where the players get drafted.
That's a great point as well.
If Golden goes to the Texans don't have Steph Diggs anymore. The jury's out on what's going to happen with Tank Dell after, more or less blowing out his knee.
Brutal.
Who's playing next to Nico Collins?
Yeah.
If someone gets drafted by the Commanders, if Tre Harris goes to the Commanders, now I'm like, well, hold on. We saw what Jaden Daniels did last year. Maybe he should be a little bit higher, right?
Yeah.
I think it depends on if Tre Harris goes to the Giants, I might be a little lower to draft him when it comes to my fantasy football team. Honestly.
For real. Yeah, it's a great point. Well, hey, we're going to roll a quick promo and we're going to get right back to the show.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Gimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies and use your favorite Player Profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
I have been whoring out those drafts, and it's a lot of fun. That's why we're doing so much homework now on these rookie classes so that we can place our bets, and hopefully Tre Harris goes in the late first. And then I'm sitting here like the richest man alive in a couple of weeks. So
let me hold a dollar then. Let me hold a dollar. If that happens.
We're going to switch it up a little bit and get into the SEC running backs because, again, you kind of ran away from Tre Harris when I was trying to throw him on the show sheet at first. And you were like, let's talk about like these running backs, Etienne and Sampson might go like, I'm hot. You're kind of relatively high on them, I think, based on just our back and forth. So talk to me about, maybe which one of these guys is your favorite and why.
Yeah, I think it's hard to ignore what Dylan Sampson did this past season. I think just from an SEC production, I thought he was the SEC, I want to say running back of the year, offensive player of the year. He should have been in the running for the Doak Walker Award, which is the top running back in the country. He was not at that ceremony, but he led the SEC when it came to rushing yards, and he was top 5 when it came to touchdowns. Major piece for Tennessee. Multiple 100+ yard games. His game reminds me a lot of Dalvin Cook, early on in his career. And so for big Florida State fans or people that follow them, they know what he brought to the table in college and what he brought to the table for the Vikings. he's going to be a solid guy to have in your backfield, I would say, very confidently in a single running back system or in a two running back system.
Yeah, I like that comp. I actually really like that comp. One thing that kind of hurt my soul was just seeing him measuring at 5'8". I know it's not a death sentence for running backs by any means, but it's just a little smaller than I expected. I mean, he's stout. Let me see. 30.4 BMI. 30 is kind of like the magic number you want to see running backs be over in terms of being able to handle a solid workload at the NFL level. But yeah, just was caught off guard by his size a little bit. Let's talk about Etienne a bit, because I feel like some people will say, oh, if he didn't have that last name, nobody would be touching him. You seem to like the guy. One thing I will kind of say is, like, I did not expect him to run a 4.40. I actually bet that he would run slower than that, and I lost. I can't remember exactly what the over-under is. I think it was like 4.48 or something. I'm like, he's a 4.5 guy. Like, I don't want to even say fast. Like, I didn't think he was fast when I watched the tape, and I'm a UF fan, so I watched a lot of Florida when he was there, and that just took me by surprise a little bit. So talk to me about why you like Etienne, and if you think is he underrated, because he's going in rookie drafts right now, like third round, around guys like Jack Besh and Restrepo even, and like,
which is crazy because Restrepo ran a terrible 40-yard dash.
Well, yeah, his ADP is definitely dropping after that. But still, people, I bet you're still finding mocks where Restrepo might be going ahead of Etienne. So talk to me a little bit more about why you like him.
Yeah, I think if Etienne, and I love playing the if game, if Etienne had transferred to Georgia a year ago, like a year prior, with the same class as Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, Carson Beck having a more effective season, he might be running back number one in this draft, because how well that offense was humming, the way he would have fit in within it, I think his production would have been even more. But the thing is that he was more or less the entire offense for Georgia this most recent season. And it's what he's able to do, not just rushing the ball, but also catching passes, screen plays, swing passes. This guy certainly should be in that second round, third round discussion when it comes to fantasy football. And I think in terms of an NFL running back, he obviously has the lineage. I think he's going to be really good. I really think he'll be really solid. Overall.
And you think he'll be like probably a third round running back, fourth round running?
Probably like a third round running back.
The fourth, but it sounds like you're thinking more of the third. And that's the thing. Nobody really freaking knows until these teams turn in their cards, So
he seems like a guy who would end up on the Chiefs or the Eagles and kind of pair next to, Isaiah Pacheco, or pair next to Saquon Barkley, where he's able to split the production. And I could be wrong, right? But I just think that he's a really solid running back. And with the right offense, he could be really good.
If he goes to the Eagles, he would be a full fade for me. Just not a full
because
fade.
Saquon's going to eat the production.
Yeah, you always want. He would have some handcuff appeal for sure.
Plus the tush push.
Yeah, dude, the tush push is freaking like just a touchdown eater for running backs. But yeah. Okay. Well, you didn't put this guy on the show sheet either, but I'm like, fuck it. We're going to talk about Jaydon Blue.
Let's do it.
I was like enamored by this guy, I think as a freshman, when he was a freshman, and was kind of surprised to see him declare as a junior. Be honest, was surprised to see a lot of these running backs declare as juniors, just because of how stacked this damn class is at running back. And he's just got so much explosiveness, so much home run ability. I think my question on the show sheet for you was, is there an opportunity for him to be the next Devon Achane based on what you've seen?
Well, Texas fans, if they're listening to this, might not love that, since Devon went to Texas A&M. But I definitely think there's an opportunity for him to be the next Devon Achane. Devon last year, I think, had 900 yards. The season before that, he had about 800 yards. So obviously improved his production for the Dolphins this past season. Jaydon Blue, it's interesting because he ended up having less rushes than Quintravion Wisner for Texas.
Yeah.
But he had more touchdowns. So he had eight touchdowns this past season. He's a big play guy. His longest rush in the season was 77 yards. And so when you think about the NFL, you want speed, you want a big play guy, you want a guy who can run in the trenches. And Jaydon Blue has proven to be that guy. It's can he stay healthy? And last year, he obviously had some health issues. Finished the season with 730 yards, so he's a good contributor. Can he stay healthy? But I think he could be overall solid. I think I could definitely see some Devon, Etienne, if I'm saying his name right, abilities. We'll just see where he goes. Like I think about last year, Jonathan Brooks was drafted by the Panthers from Texas.
Yeah, second round. He didn't do that much. And so sometimes I worry about these guys, if they're not Amarion Hampton, if they're not like just the running back you can't miss on, I'm always curious how much production they're going to get. And obviously Devon Etienne was not that. Isaiah Pacheco was not that. There's other guys, but like I'm curious how many carries he'll get once he's in the league. Is he capable? Of course. I'm just curious what situation he ends up in. Yeah, I agree. I think my red flag for him is ball security. He had some fumble issues this year. But my green flag is the passing game. He would be a weapon, a mismatch against linebackers all day, productive receiver at Texas. And that's where I kind of see the Devon Etienne comp a little bit. It's just like, get this guy the ball on a screen or a swing pass and let him make a guy miss and turn on those burners. So,
and that's what Etienne and Blue do a lot better than Dylan Sampson. It's what they can do in the passing game. Like, I mean, Blue had last year 368 yards, 6 touchdowns in the air. It's just he's versatile. It's really phenomenal. You put his rushing and his passing stats together, it's 1,000-yard plus season.
Yeah, 14 total touchdowns. I didn't realize that until I looked a little deeper either. Because to your point, 8 rush touchdowns, fine. 14 total touchdowns, not bad at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, well, cool. Love diving into these SEC running backs. I love them too because they're kind of the deep cuts, like in this class, because you've got the Jeanty, Hampton. People will say Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. Then it's like these guys are almost everyone is talking about these guys after them.
Yeah.
But there's only so many chairs in the NFL, right? And so I think landing spot is going to be really important for these guys.
Yeah.
But I have
more chairs at running back than quarterback, though.
Yeah, at least you get 2 chairs. Kind of to your point, it's more of like a 2 running back system for a lot of these leagues. And that's the thing. I think a guy like Blue in the passing game, or just even as a change of pace pack, getting like 8 to 10 touches could be a fantasy relevant player, especially in PPR leagues. So, well, let's keep it moving. Let's talk a little bit about these QBs. You like the Milroe one?
I love it.
I tried to find my favorite images of these guys, and we won't spend too long on the QBs because, to be honest, it's freaking like impossible to scout QBs. Like it really is. Anybody who says they know how to scout a QB is full of crap. So, but talk, just not to take away from your takes here. Jaxson Dart, he's pretty consensus the QB3 behind Cam Ward and Shador. Does that add up for you?
Yeah, that's 100%. That adds up. I think QB3 is. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, he led the SEC when it came to, or he was top 3 in the SEC in yards. He was top 10 passing yards in the country this past season. A lot of those yards, if you look at the tape, did come against the Furmans, the Wake Forests, the kind of the lower competition. You would have liked to see him win more some of those bigger games, but played a big game against Georgia, played a really good game against South Carolina as well. What pops out on the tape is his ability to run and pass. Obviously, a much more proficient passer than Jalen Milroe proved to be in college. Not speaking to what his future abilities are, but Dart has the poise. I think this is my own personal bias. He wears the same number as Matt Corral. And so they both played at Ole Miss. And so sometimes I'm like, are we overhyping him, or is he really that guy? But I have to believe he could be that guy. But there's a drop off. There's a clear drop off between 2 and 3 that we didn't really see last year. Last year, you think about the quarterback draft, and I'll finish this thought here. What I love about doing analysis for the draft is looking at, okay, what did we think last year, and what do these players actually do?
Yeah.
And what did that class look like? So last year's class, you had Drake May, you had Jaden Daniels, you had Bo Nix. Bo Nix is probably about the comp you would give Jaxson Dart. Maybe he's not as good, but it's easy to say because we saw what Bo did in the league this past year. I don't think a lot of people thought Bo was going to be as good as he was, right?
100%.
But I think when you look at those quarterbacks between Jaden Daniels and Drake May and Caleb Williams, they felt like there was a big drop off with Bo Nix. And the jury's out on Michael Penix, but like we felt like there was a big drop off. I feel like that class feels like it's better than this class, especially when you go down to the 3rd through 6th.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I appreciate you giving kind of a line in the sand there between like those are the top 2, because you'll see some people saying Jaxson Dart is a top 2 quarterback in this class. And I'll be honest, the tape, I don't hate it one bit.
No.
I think he could be a solid player at the next level. I think he probably will get 1st round draft capital and like decent. Like,
I mean, he wins
top 10 or 12,
He's won at a similar level to Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. His stats are very similar to Shedeur. I think his weapons are, if you don't like Travis Hunter, you say they're worse. If you do like Travis Hunter, you say they're better. It's like he's had a similar situation to Shedeur. And if people believe that Shedeur is QB2, you could make the case that Jaxson Dart's QB2. Do you mortgage your franchise on Jaxson Dart? I don't know.
Yeah. So another guy getting some 1st round steam is Jalen Milroe. And, man, when I see some of the like him at the Senior Bowl, just throwing in like, again, we shouldn't be taking Senior Bowl throwing drills with too much like weight in them, because you're throwing to air, right, as your defender. But when you're missing badly, you kind of do put weight into it. You're like, why the frick can't this guy hit a pass like wide open to a player in practice? So I see some serious holes to him as a thrower. I think a lot of people will go back to like, the same thing said about Jalen Hurts, right? And do you think that's a fair comp? Do you think that Milroe has more serious holes in his game than Hurts?
I mean, when you phrase the question like that, I think the answer is yes. He has more holes than Jalen Hurts. I think when you think about Jalen Hurts, he was a successful passer and starter at Alabama. He willed the team to a national championship, and then when he was at Oklahoma, he was a Heisman candidate, right? And he won the Big 12 player of the year.
Right?
Totally different situation. He ended up going 2nd round. There was never really any talks of him going 1st round. And I don't think that Jalen Milroe was a 1st round quarterback. I just feel like if you go off of, you're already kind of going off of upside and what could develop for every player in the draft. But for him, it really feels like we're really looking at, okay, he can develop more as a passer. When I hear those types of terms, I think about EJ Manuel. I think about Anthony Richardson.
Woof.
And it's like it's a possibility, and that's a lot to invest a 1st round pick in.
Yeah.
Could Jalen Milroe be an NFL quarterback? Absolutely. I'd love to see him kind of like on a Steelers situation where he can develop and learn from a Mike Tomlin situation, 2nd, 3rd round. I don't see him being a 1st rounder, but what his differentiator is his legs. He rushed for, I think, about 16 touchdowns this past season, which was more than like 80% of some of the teams in college football. If he can get the passing a little bit more in line, he could be a guy. I just think that's a lot to ask for a 1st rounder.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if he does go in the 1st round, you have to adjust the ranks significantly, right? Because if they do put that level of investment in him, he's going to see the field. And again, we're not always talking about real life football. There's a lot of shitty quarterbacks who are really good fantasy assets like Justin Fields, right? But some of the people who are mocking him to the Steelers, I don't think understand that like Tomlin's the same guy who benched Justin Fields for Russell frickin' Wilson at this stage of his career. So I don't think Tomlin's is high on getting another like Justin Fields 2.0 in the first round. But if he does, or another team does take a chance on this guy late first, even if they're like some scenario where they trade up in the early second, you have to say, okay, they went and got this guy for a reason, probably not to be a backup, his whole career. So,
and that's a different discussion, right? It's like if a team does take him first round versus do I think he has holes in his game compared to Jalen Hurts? Yes, he has holes. If they take him first round, that investment, like you said, should warrant more looks at taking him higher in the fantasy draft. No doubt.
Yeah. So we already touched on this guy, Quinn Ewers. So let's just spend like 30 seconds on him. The show sheet I put Ewers, question mark, or like Quinn Ewers, or do you like him? And it sounded like you're not as much of a hater as a lot of others are, but do you like him?
I mean, I think he's solid. Nothing on his tape like pops out as like he stands out with his deep ball or he stands out with his, passing between the hashes. He makes minimal mistakes. He had a point in the season where he was kind of having some troubles just getting humming and going, but I get very much a serviceable backup potential, come in a little bit starter. I'm not seeing that he's like going to be the guy, but he could be though. I mean, he was a 5-star prospect. He was one of the first NIL type guys, $1 million offer to go to Ohio State. So I just think that he nothing in his game was like, man, he stood out, but I think he's certainly a good quarterback. I don't see the value in terms of fantasy football, but I see him being drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, primarily between the second and third round.
But to be more probably a backup, right? It'd be cool. When you say that, I'm like, be interesting to see him maybe land like with the Rams, sit behind a guy like Stafford. But to your point, like from a fantasy football perspective, you've got to target guys like Dart and Milroe who have legs, right? And Ewers is just not a runner. And that's going to limit the upside,
He is terrible when the pocket is getting crushed. He is terrible. You watch the Georgia games; he is just so uncomfortable. And when you think about the NFL, it's like most of the NFL starting quarterbacks went in the first 2 rounds. I would say with full confidence, right? Like Russell Wilson's probably one of the only ones who's a
Brock Purdy.
Russell Wilson, Brock Purdy, Russell Wilson, Dak
Prescott.
Prescott. Yeah. But most of these guys are early round, day 1, day 2 guys. And I don't know. I think he's serviceable. And then when I think about Texas quarterbacks, Sam Ehlinger, Colt McCoy, Vince Young, none of these guys were really just NFL studs. And Quinn Ewers is his own guy. Don't get me wrong. But Colt McCoy is really, really good at Texas, and he had a good career. He was a NFL backup who started a couple seasons. He, could still be on a roster today. Quinn Ewers would have to step up to me to really be that guy to start on a team.
Okay. Well, hey, we got to close it out with, because my boy Randy does equal work on both sides of the ball. We've got to close it out with a little D. Like, I almost puked when he brought this idea up of like, let's talk some defense. And I was like, dude, this is not what this is about. But I think that it's just based on the level of work that you put in analyzing the SEC as a whole and the quality of defense in this draft. It could be relevant for fantasy gamers to just take a few minutes and talk through some of these guys. So let us start. I'm not going to move necessarily left to right here. I like Jihad Campbell a lot, and I believe you like him a lot. Who does he remind you of?
Yeah, and I think from a fantasy perspective, when you look at the SEC defense or you look at the defense, I'm looking at which defense was really good last year. And when I think about my matchups each week, the players I'm shifting are going to be based upon the defense I'm facing. So right. And the SEC is the king when it comes to having players in the NFL on defense. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles have like 5 different Georgia Bulldogs on their defense, and they have one of the top defenses in the league. So it doesn't necessarily affect you from picking your players defensively, but it plays a role when you see, you know, Pat Surtain lining up against your number 1 receiver that week. You might change who you put at wide receiver too when you got Pat Surtain from Alabama playing against them. But going left to right, and what I think about Jahad Campbell, I think he's an incredible linebacker. He does all the things right. I mean, he's good at rushing the passer. He is good at being a run stopper. He limits passing plays when it comes to yak. He's really good at making tackles on contact. Led Alabama in terms of tackles last year. He's top 10 in the country when it came to tackles. His game reminds me a lot of Roquan Smith when it comes to being a linebacker, and I think he's an all-around good guy. He's from New Jersey. He went to IMG Academy. He's a junior, so he's just a really good guy.
Dude, I'd be interested to see him on the line of scrimmage rushing the passer a little more, because he's just got that build where I could see him like being a dog. So Walter Nolan in the middle there, that's your guy. Talk to us about what he does, what he's going to bring to an NFL defense, and maybe anybody he reminds you of.
I feel like his demeanor is Jameis Winston. His like he seems like a pretty playful, fun guy, but he's a dog in them trenches. He was a 5-star recruit, number 1 recruit in the country out of high school. Played for Texas A&M for a couple of years, transferred over to Ole Miss. And I mean, he like another one of those guys where usually when it comes to D tackles, they do one of 2 things right, whether it's pass rush or it's a run stopper. And he proved at the collegiate level he could do both well. I've seen NFL mock drafts kind of having him go late first. I think that speaks to the depth of the drafts. I think it speaks to the depth of the defensive linemen in the draft. But this guy is going to be a force for a team. Cool,
man. Well, I love that you love him. And I threw this guy on the show sheet just because I've heard a lot about him. I admittedly have not seen as much film on him as I'll probably do after some rookie drafts and stuff for fantasy football. But Jalen Walker, close us out. Will he be a top 3 defensive player in this class ultimately?
For year 1 or for like when we think about whole career?
Yeah. Just like in 3 years, are we going to be looking at this guy like, Micah Parsons-esque in terms of the what they bring to a defense?
That's tough because I mean Georgia produces so many good NFL players, and I can't speak to like just a dominant Georgia player from an outside linebacker perspective. Like obviously Roquan Smith's really good. There's a lot of really, really good guys. I think he'll be one of those guys in this class, no doubt. I expect to see a couple Pro Bowls. I don't know if I can give him like the best player from this class, but you got Jahdae Barron from Texas.
He's a baller.
He's a baller. You got Malachi Starks at safety. I think he's a baller from Georgia. Trey Amos will be really good. I mean, there's so many good guys. Mikael Williams from Georgia as well, who plays opposite to Jalen Walker at defensive line, is really good. And so I think he's going to be one of those guys. I expect a couple Pro Bowls. I don't know if he'll be the best guy. If you put me on the spot.
No, that's okay. Well, Randall, thank you so much for your time today, man. You've absolutely crushed it, improved the wealth of knowledge that you've accumulated with the SEC. Close it out. Tell the people where they can find you. Yeah,
absolutely. So, you can find us on the new SEC podcast on YouTube. It's the off season, so we've been posting little reels here or there. But this past season, we did game previews, game recaps, players, power rankings, and so if you want to learn more about the SEC, learn more about some of the top players, definitely go on to YouTube to see what we got going on there and the shorts as well.
Show them that hat before I end the stream. Show them that hat.
There it is.
New SEC podcast. This guy's all in, guys. Have the hats made and everything. Really love the work you guys are doing, Randall. Thank you so much for being on the show. Give Randall a follow, a subscribe on the new SEC podcast. You know what to do for this show. Like, comment, subscribe. Any questions you have, you comment them. Randall and I will get back to you. and good luck winning your fantasy football league.